Say that again, he said, and the entire room forgot how to breathe. I wasn't supposed to look at him. People like me kept their heads down, carried trays, and disappeared between conversations that cost more than my rent. But I looked anyway. Adrian Varelli stood in the center of the private dining room, like he owned the air itself. Tailored suit, dark eyes, quiet control. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The man in front of him stuttered, suddenly unsure of his own words. No one helped him. No one ever helped anyone when Adrian was involved. I should have walked away. That was the rule. Stay invisible. Stay safe. But something in his tone pulled at me. Not anger. Not exactly. Something colder. Something precise. I tightened my grip on the tray, feeling the faint tremble in my fingers. I hated that tremble. I had trained it out of myself years ago. Or I thought I had. I asked you a question, Adrian said softly. The kind of soft that makes people listen harder. The man tried again, his voice thinner now, like it didn't belong to him anymore. Around them, expensive watches paused midair. Conversations dissolved into silence. Even the music seemed to step back. I took one step forward. Just one. Enough to hear what came next. Adrian switched languages without warning. Italian. Smooth. Controlled. Measured like a blade wrapped in silk. He wasn't speaking to the man anymore. He was giving instructions. Quiet ones. The kind that changed outcomes. The kind that made people disappear from rooms without anyone asking where they went. He assumed no one else understood. That was his first mistake. My pulse slowed instead of racing. That was my tell. When things got dangerous, I didn't panic. I focused. Every word he said landed exactly where I expected. Every inflection confirmed it. Southern roots. Old influence. Not just learned. Lived. I should have stayed silent. That was the second rule. But rules were made for the version of me that no longer existed. I stepped closer. Close enough that he noticed me for the first time. His eyes flicked toward me. Brief. Dismissive. Like I was nothing. Just another waitress. That was his second mistake. You just declared war, I said, in perfect Italian. Not textbook. Not polished. Real. The kind that carries history. The kind that doesn't ask for permission. The room cracked open. Silence hit harder than any noise. The man in front of him forgot to breathe again. Adrian didn't move. That was the first thing I noticed. Most men reacted. Shifted. Blinked. He didn't. His gaze settled on me fully now. Not dismissive anymore. Not bored. Something sharper. Something calculating. Say that again, he repeated, but this time it wasn't a threat. It was a question. I held his gaze. Didn't look down. Didn't soften. You heard me, I said quietly. My voice didn't shake. Not this time. Not ever again. A flicker passed through his expression. Not anger. Not surprise. Recognition without understanding. Like he had found something he wasn't looking for. Who are you? He asked. Not loudly. Not urgently. But the room leaned toward the answer anyway. I could feel it. The weight of attention. The shift of power. The moment tilting. I set the tray down slowly, the glass barely making a sound against the table. Someone you shouldn't have noticed, I said. And for the first time that night, Adrian Varelli smiled. Not warm. Not kind. Just interested. And interest, in his world, was far more dangerous than anger. The smile did not reach his eyes. That was the first thing I noticed as Adrian Varelli studied me like a puzzle missing a piece he suddenly needed. The room did not move, but everything had shifted. Power had a new center, and it was not where it had been a minute ago. I felt it in the air, in the silence that stretched too long to be comfortable. You speak like you belong somewhere else, he said quietly, switching back to English as if testing which version of me would answer. I did not respond immediately. Timing mattered more than words. And you listen like you expect people to lie, I replied, keeping my tone even, controlled. A faint murmur rippled through the edges of the room, quickly swallowed by the weight of his presence. No one dared interrupt. No one dared leave. Adrian tilted his head slightly, a movement so small it almost did not exist. Everyone lies, he said. It is just a matter of when. His gaze did not leave mine. Not once. Not even when someone behind him shifted nervously. That kind of focus was deliberate, measured, dangerous. I had seen it before. Years ago, in rooms that smelled different but felt exactly the same. I should have stepped back, should have lowered my eyes and returned to the role everyone expected. But something in me refused. Not pride. Not exactly. Something older. Something that had been quiet for too long. Then you are asking the wrong question, I said. His expression sharpened, just a fraction. Enough for me to know I had his full attention now. What question should I be asking, he asked. Not mocking, not dismissive. Curious. That was worse. Curiosity meant time. It meant interest. It meant I had stepped into something that did not let go easily. I reached for the tray again, steady this time, grounding myself in something simple. Not who I am, I said softly, but why I understood you. The man he had confronted earlier was no longer the center of anything. He stood forgotten, like a shadow that had lost its purpose. Adrian glanced at him briefly, then back at me, dismissing him without a word. That was how his world worked. Attention was currency, and I had just taken all of it. All right, Adrian said. Why did you understand me? The question landed differently, less like a test, more like an opening. I could feel the room leaning again, waiting for something they did not deserve to hear. I exhaled slowly. Not fear, not hesitation, calculation. Because you do not threaten, I said. You decide. His eyes darkened, not with anger, but with recognition. I had named something he did not offer freely, something most people did not notice. The silence deepened. Then, unexpectedly, he stepped back. Just one step. But it changed everything. Distance, in his world, was a choice. And he had just given me space instead of taking it. Interesting, he murmured. He turned slightly, addressing no one and everyone at the same time. We are done here. The tension broke, but only on the surface. People moved again, but carefully, like the floor might shift beneath them. Conversations resumed in low voices, pretending nothing had happened. But everything had. Adrian did not leave. Not yet. He stayed exactly where he was, his attention still anchored to me like a decision he had not finished making. You should not be here, he said after a moment, his voice lower now, meant only for me. I almost smiled. Not because it was funny, because it was familiar. Neither should you, I replied. That was when something changed again. Not in the room. In him. A flicker of something unreadable crossed his face, gone before it could settle into a name. I built this place, he said. I decide where I should be. I met his gaze without flinching. And yet you are asking questions you already know the answer to. For the first time, he paused. Not a performance. Not calculated. Real. It lasted less than a second, but it was enough. I had interrupted his certainty. And in his world, certainty was everything. He stepped closer again, not invading, just enough to remind me who he was. Be careful, he said quietly. You are starting to sound like someone who matters. I held his gaze, steady, unyielding. Maybe I always did. The words settled between us, heavier than they sounded. Adrian studied me for a long moment, then gave a slight nod, as if confirming something only he could see. We will talk again, he said. Not a question, not a request, a decision. Then he turned and walked away, the room parting for him without hesitation. But this time, I did not feel invisible as he left. I felt seen, and that was far more dangerous than being ignored. I should have left the moment he walked away. That was the smart move. Finish the shift, collect the tip money, disappear before curiosity turned into something else. But I stayed. Not because I wanted to, because leaving too fast would have been noticed. And tonight, being noticed was already a problem. I picked up the tray again, forcing my hands into routine. Glasses, plates, polite nods, small steps. The world tried to reset itself, but it felt staged now, like everyone was pretending the air had not changed. I could feel eyes on me. Not the usual kind. Not the careless glances or quiet judgments. These were measured. Intentional. People who had seen what just happened and were trying to understand it without asking questions. I moved through the tables anyway, steady, controlled. That was the only way to survive rooms like this. Blend without shrinking. Exist without offering anything extra. It worked for almost 5 minutes. Then I saw him again. Not in the center this time. Off to the side, near the bar, speaking with someone I recognized as management. His posture was relaxed, but nothing about him was casual. He was listening more than talking. Always listening. His gaze shifted before I could look away. It found me instantly, like he had been expecting it. Not searching. Waiting. I turned first. Not abruptly. Just enough to break the line. But it was too late. The connection had already been made. A moment later, my manager appeared at my side. His smile was too tight. Maris, he said quietly, keeping his voice friendly for anyone watching. He asked for you. Of course he did. I did not ask who. I did not need to. I set the tray down carefully, aligning the edges like it mattered. I am working, I said. My manager's smile did not change, but his eyes did. You are now assigned to a private table, he replied. Do not keep him waiting. There it was. Not a request. A rearrangement. I nodded once, because refusing here would only draw more attention. And attention was already a problem. The walk to the private section felt longer than it should have. Each step measured. Each breath controlled. I passed through the velvet partition and into a quieter space where the noise of the restaurant softened into something distant. Adrian stood alone now, one hand resting lightly on the back of a chair. He did not sit. He did not look rushed. He looked exactly like a man who expected the world to adjust itself around him. I stopped 3 feet away. Not too close. Not too far. Distance was language in places like this. You asked for me, I said. No greeting. No apology. Just fact. His eyes moved over me, slower this time. Not assessing my uniform. Not dismissing me as staff. Studying. You did not leave, he said. It was not a question. Neither did you, I replied. A faint shift in his expression. Approval, maybe. Or recognition. It was hard to tell with men like him. Sit, he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. I did not move. That was not my place. Not my role. I work here, I said instead. Then consider this part of your work, he replied calmly. Not forceful. Not raised. Just inevitable. I hesitated for half a second, then sat. Slowly. Deliberately. If this was a test, I would not fail it by pretending I did not understand the rules. He took the seat across from me, mirroring my pace. That was the second thing I noticed. He adjusted to me, not the other way around. You speak Italian like you grew up with it, he said. No preamble. Straight to the point. I learned early, I answered. Not a lie. Not the full truth. His gaze sharpened slightly. From who? There it was. The real question. I held his gaze, letting the silence stretch just enough. Someone who does not answer questions anymore, I said. His eyes did not soften, but something behind them shifted. Not sympathy. Understanding. That kind of teacher leaves a mark, he said quietly. I almost smiled again. So does the kind that asks too many questions, I replied. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The quiet between us was not empty. It was building, measuring, deciding. Then he leaned back slightly, studying me in a way that felt less like interrogation and more like selection. You are not what you pretend to be, he said. I tilted my head just enough to acknowledge the statement without confirming it. And you are exactly what people say, I replied. His lips curved again, faint, controlled. That should concern you, he said. It does, I answered. Just not in the way you expect. That was when the door behind him opened slightly. One of his men stepped in, stopping just inside the threshold. He did not speak. He did not need to. Adrian glanced at him briefly, then back at me. A silent exchange passed between them. Information. Timing. Something had shifted outside this room. Adrian stood slowly, his attention never leaving me. We will continue this, he said. Not a promise. Not a threat. Something in between. I remained seated for a second longer, then stood as well. You already decided that, I said. He paused, just for a moment, then gave the smallest nod. Yes, he said. I did. And as he turned to leave, I realized something that made my chest tighten just slightly. This was no longer about curiosity. This was about recognition. And recognition, in his world, never came without consequences. The room felt smaller after he left. Not physically. Nothing had moved. But the space he occupied lingered, like a shadow that refused to fade even after the light changed. I stood there for a moment longer than I should have, just long enough to feel it settle. Then I moved. Back to the routine. Back to the version of me that belonged here. Plates. Glasses. Quiet steps. Controlled breathing. The shift continued, but it no longer felt the same. Every sound was sharper. Every glance carried weight. I could feel the ripple of what had happened spreading through the staff, quiet whispers dressed as casual remarks. No one approached me directly. They never do when something does not make sense. They observe. They wait. They let someone else ask the dangerous questions. My manager avoided me completely for the next 20 minutes. That alone told me enough. I was no longer just an employee in his eyes. I was a complication. And complications, in places like this, rarely lasted long. I finished the last table in my section with practiced precision, my movements automatic, my mind somewhere else entirely. I replayed every word Adrian had said. Every pause. Every shift in tone. Men like him did not waste attention, and he had given me too much of it. That meant one thing. This was not over. The kitchen doors swung open as I stepped through, the heat wrapping around me instantly. Familiar. Grounding. The staff moved around me in tight patterns, focused on orders, timing, execution. No one asked me anything, but I felt the difference. A space had formed around me that had not been there before. Not respect, not fear. Something closer to uncertainty. I moved to the back hallway, the narrow corridor that led to the employee lockers. The noise of the restaurant faded with each step, replaced by a quieter kind of tension, the kind that lives in silence. I opened my locker, reaching for my bag, my fingers brushing against the fabric like I needed confirmation that something here was still mine. That was when I noticed it. A small envelope. Plain. Unmarked. Resting inside like it had always been there. It had not. I did not touch it right away. I just looked at it, letting the moment stretch. Calculating. Measuring risk against curiosity. Curiosity wins more often than it should. I picked it up slowly, feeling the weight. Light. Intentional. Inside, there was a single card. Thick paper. Expensive. A name. Adrian Varelli. No number. No address. Just the name. And beneath it, written in clean, precise handwriting, a single line. You owe me a conversation. I exhaled quietly, the smallest shift in my breath betraying more than I liked. Of course he would not wait. Of course he would move first. Men like him always do. I turned the card over. Blank. No hidden message. No second meaning. Just an invitation that was not really an invitation. It was a decision already made. I slid the card back into the envelope, then into my bag. Not accepting. Not refusing. Just acknowledging. The sound of footsteps echoed faintly from the corridor behind me. I closed the locker without turning. You are either very brave or very careless, a voice said, low, controlled. Not Adrian. One of his men. I turned slowly, meeting the gaze of the man standing a few feet away. He was composed, observant, the kind of presence that blends into the background until it needs to be seen. Those are not opposites, I said. His expression did not change, but something in his eyes shifted. Recognition, maybe, or assessment. He does not usually repeat himself, the man continued. Neither do I replied. Silence settled between us, heavier this time. Not tense. Measured. He studied me for a moment longer, then gave a slight nod, as if confirming something to himself. Be ready, he said simply. No threat. No warning. Just a statement. Then he turned and walked away, his footsteps fading back toward the noise of the restaurant. I stood there alone again, but it felt different now. Clearer. Defined. I reached for my bag, gripping the strap a little tighter than before. The line had been crossed. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But it had happened. And there was no stepping back from it. I glanced once toward the hallway that led back to the dining room. Then toward the exit at the end of the corridor. Two directions. Two versions of the same night. I chose the exit. Not to run. Not to escape. Just to breathe. The cool night air hit my skin as I stepped outside, the city stretching around me in quiet motion. Cars passing. Lights shifting. Life continuing like nothing had changed. But something had. I could feel it in the way my pulse refused to settle. In the way my thoughts aligned around a single, undeniable truth. Adrian Varelli had seen me. And now, he was waiting for me to decide what that meant. The night air should have calmed me. It usually did. Cold, steady, predictable. Unlike people. Unlike him. I walked down the block without a destination, my steps slow but deliberate, each one buying me time to think. The envelope in my bag felt heavier now, like it carried more than paper. Like it carried a decision I had not made yet. I stopped at the corner, the city lights reflecting off passing cars, stretching into long streaks that blurred if I stared too long. I did not like uncertainty. I had built my life around avoiding it. Careful choices. Controlled risks. Invisible paths. And tonight, all of that had been disrupted by a man who did not believe in boundaries. I reached into my bag and pulled out the card again. Adrian Varelli. No title. No explanation. Just a name that already carried too much weight. You owe me a conversation. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was accurate. In his world, a moment like that created a debt. Not financial. Not simple. Something else. Something more binding. I turned the card between my fingers, feeling the texture, the precision of it. Everything about him was intentional. Even this. Especially this. I could walk away. That was still an option. Change jobs. Change routine. Disappear before interest turned into pursuit. I had done it before. Different city. Different name. Same quiet exit. It would not be difficult. But this felt different. Not because of him. Because of me. I had stepped forward tonight. Not by accident. Not by mistake. I had chosen to speak. And choices like that have consequences. I slipped the card back into my bag and exhaled slowly. Running now would not undo what had already been set in motion. It would only delay it. I started walking again, this time with direction. Back toward the street where my apartment sat above a closed storefront, the kind of place no one noticed twice. It took 10 minutes. Enough time for my thoughts to settle into something sharper, more defined. By the time I reached the building, I knew one thing for certain. Ignoring him was not the same as avoiding him. I climbed the narrow staircase, each step creaking in a familiar rhythm. Inside, my apartment greeted me with quiet stillness. A single lamp, a small table, everything in its place. Controlled, predictable, safe. I locked the door behind me and leaned against it for a moment, letting the silence settle around me. Then I moved. Bag on the table, shoes off. Routine again. But even routine felt different now. I pulled the envelope out once more, placing it flat against the table like I expected it to change if I looked at it long enough. You owe me a conversation. No time. No place. Just expectation. That meant one thing. He wanted me to choose. I sat down slowly, resting my hands on the edge of the table. If I ignored it, he would come looking. Not out of anger. Out of interest. And interest, as I had already learned, was far more persistent. If I answered, I stepped into his world on purpose. There would be no pretending after that. No hiding behind a uniform or a role. Just truth. Or something close to it. I leaned back slightly, my gaze fixed on the card. This was not about curiosity anymore. It was about control. Who moved first? Who defined the terms? And for the first time in a long while, I felt something I had not expected. Not fear. Not hesitation. Anticipation. I reached for my phone, hesitating for half a second before unlocking it. No number. Of course not. He would not make it that simple. I set the phone down again, a faint smile touching my lips before I could stop it. All right, I murmured to the empty room. We will do this your way. I picked up the card, studying it one last time, then slipped it into my pocket instead of the bag. A small shift, but intentional. Tomorrow, I would go back. Not as a waitress who avoided his gaze. Not as someone pretending not to understand. But as someone who had already stepped across the line. And this time, I would not wait for him to ask the next question. The next morning did not feel like a new beginning. It felt like a continuation of something I had already agreed to without saying the words out loud. I woke before my alarm, staring at the ceiling as the city slowly came alive outside my window. The card was still in my pocket, exactly where I had left it. That mattered more than it should have. It meant I had already chosen not to ignore it. I got dressed with the same precision as always. Neutral colors. Clean lines. Nothing that invited attention. But something in my posture had changed. I could feel it in the way I moved, in the way I no longer tried to shrink into the background. By the time I stepped outside, the air felt sharper. Not colder. Clearer. Like everything had edges now. The walk back to the restaurant took 15 minutes. I noticed everything along the way. Reflections in windows. Passing faces. The rhythm of footsteps behind me. Old habits. Instincts that never really go away. When I reached the door, I paused for half a second. Not hesitation. Calibration. Then I stepped inside. The restaurant looked the same. Polished. Controlled. Perfectly arranged. But I knew better now. I moved through the space without rushing, nodding to familiar faces, slipping back into the role everyone expected. For now, my manager spotted me almost immediately. His expression tightened before he smoothed it into something neutral. Maris, he said, walking toward me with careful steps. You are early. I like to be prepared, I replied. He studied me for a moment, like he was trying to decide how much he could say. You have been reassigned, he said finally. Of course I had. To what? I asked. He hesitated, just long enough to confirm what I already suspected. Private service, he said. Effective immediately. I nodded once. No surprise. No resistance. Just acceptance of the shift that had already been set in motion. He exhaled quietly, almost relieved that I had not argued. He is already here, he added, lowering his voice. I felt the smallest shift in my pulse, but nothing showed on my face. I assumed he would be, I said. My manager looked at me like he wanted to ask something else, but thought better of it. Do not keep him waiting, he said instead. I turned before he could say more, moving toward the private section with steady steps. The same velvet partition, the same quiet space. But it felt different now, like I was walking into something I understood, instead of something I was trying to avoid. Adrian was exactly where I expected him to be. Seated this time, one arm resting along the back of the chair, his posture relaxed but deliberate. He did not look up immediately when I entered. He knew I was there. That was clear. I stopped across from him, the same distance as before. 3 feet. Close enough to speak. Far enough to choose how. You made a decision, he said without looking at me. Not a question. A statement. I slipped the card from my pocket and placed it on the table between us. So did you, I replied. His gaze lifted slowly, settling on the card first, then on me. There was no surprise in his expression. Only confirmation. Most people would have ignored it, he said. Most people do not understand what it means, I answered. A faint curve touched his lips, not quite a smile. And you do? I held his gaze, steady, unflinching. I understand enough to know that ignoring you is not the same as avoiding you. That earned a real reaction. Subtle, but real. His fingers tapped once against the table, a quiet rhythm that suggested thought rather than impatience. Sit, he said again, softer this time. I did. No hesitation. No resistance. Just acceptance of the space we were now sharing. He leaned forward slightly, his attention focused entirely on me. Then let us not waste time, he said. Why are you here? The question was simple. The answer was not. I let the silence stretch just long enough to matter. Because you are not the kind of man who leaves things unfinished, I said. His eyes sharpened, interest deepening. And you, he asked. Are you the kind of woman who does? I met his gaze without breaking. Not anymore. The words settled between us, heavier than they sounded. For a moment, neither of us moved. The air felt still, but not empty. Charged. Measured. Then Adrian leaned back slightly, studying me with a new kind of focus. Not curiosity. Not suspicion. Something closer to recognition. Good, he said quietly. Then we can finally start asking the right questions. He did not ask the next question immediately. That was intentional. Adrian Varelli understood timing better than most people understood words. He let the silence settle, not as a pause, but as pressure. I held it without looking away. That mattered. In rooms like this, the first person to fill silence usually lost something. Then let us begin with something simple, he said finally, his voice low, controlled. Why did you come back? I did not rush my answer. I let the question sit, turning it once in my mind before responding. Because leaving would not have ended this, I said. His gaze sharpened slightly, interest deepening. And staying will, he asked. I tilted my head just enough to acknowledge the shift. Staying lets me choose how it begins, I replied. That earned the smallest nod. Approval, or recognition. With him, the difference was thin. You assume you have that kind of control, he said. Not dismissive. Testing. I met his gaze evenly. I assume you respect it when someone does. A flicker of something passed through his expression. Not surprise. Something closer to agreement. He leaned back slightly, his posture relaxed but deliberate. You speak like someone who has been taught carefully, he said. Not formally. Precisely. I did not answer immediately. That kind of observation was not casual. It was targeted. And you listen like someone who has been lied to often, I replied. His lips curved faintly, a quiet acknowledgement of the exchange. Often enough, he said. The room felt smaller again, not because of space, but because of focus. Everything outside of this table faded into something distant and irrelevant. This was no longer a conversation. It was an evaluation. So tell me something true, Adrian said. Not useful, not strategic, just true. That was a different kind of question. More dangerous than the others. Truth, in his world, was currency, and giving it away freely was rarely wise. I considered it anyway. Not for long. I did not expect you to notice me, I said. His eyes did not leave mine. And yet you spoke anyway, he replied. That is not hesitation. That is choice. I exhaled quietly, just enough to shift the moment. And you noticed anyway, I said. That is not curiosity. That is intention. Silence followed, heavier this time. Not empty. Weighted. Measured. Adrian's fingers rested still against the table now, No movement, no distraction. Complete attention. You are not afraid, he said. It was not a question. It was a conclusion. I let a fraction of a second pass before answering. That would depend on what you think I should be afraid of, I said. His gaze sharpened again, something deeper settling behind it. People like me, he said quietly. I held his gaze without shifting. People like you are predictable, I replied. That changed something. Not dramatically, not visibly to anyone else. But I saw it. A shift in focus. A recalibration. Predictable, he repeated, his voice softer now. You are going to have to explain that. I leaned forward slightly, mirroring his earlier movement. Not challenging. Matching. You expect control, I said. You create it, maintain it, and remove anything that threatens it. His eyes did not blink. Not once. And that makes me predictable? He asked. It makes your choices consistent, I replied. And consistency can be read. The silence that followed was different. Not tension, not curiosity, something closer to recognition, like a pattern being confirmed. Adrian studied me for a long moment, longer than before, like he was seeing past the surface now. You have done this before, he said. Not a guess. A statement. I did not answer. Not with words. But I did not deny it either. That was enough. Then let me ask you something more interesting, he continued. If you can read me, what do you see now? The question settled between us, deliberate and sharp. This was the pivot. The moment where answers mattered more than impressions. I did not rush it. I let the silence stretch just enough to show I understood the weight of it. Then I spoke. You are not trying to control this, I said quietly. His expression did not change, but his attention deepened. You are trying to understand it. That landed. I could see it in the way his posture shifted, almost imperceptibly, like something had aligned in his mind. And why would that matter? He asked. I met his gaze fully, no hesitation left. Because men like you do not seek understanding unless something has already changed, I said. The silence that followed was absolute. Not a sound from the room beyond. Not a movement from him. Just stillness. Then, slowly, Adrian Varelli smiled. Not the faint curve from before. Not controlled. Something real. And that was when I understood something I had not expected. This was no longer about questions. It was about what came after them. That smile did not disappear quickly. It lingered, not as amusement, but as confirmation. Adrian Varelli did not smile often. When he did, it meant something had aligned in his favor, or something had surprised him enough to be worth keeping. I did not move. I did not react. That mattered more than anything I could have said. People mistake reaction for honesty. It is not. It is exposure. And I had learned a long time ago what happens when you give too much away too soon. You think something has changed, he said, his voice quieter now, more focused. Not challenging. Not dismissing. Considering. I met his gaze evenly. I know it has, I replied. That was the truth. Not all of it. But enough. His fingers tapped once against the table, then stilled again. A habit, or a signal. It was hard to tell with him. Then tell me what it is, he said. Not a demand. Not quite. Something closer to invitation. Dangerous in its own way. I let the silence stretch, not to resist, but to choose. Timing, again. Always timing. You are no longer asking who I am, I said. You are asking what I mean. That landed differently. I could see it in the way his attention sharpened, like a lens focusing more precisely. And what do you think you mean? He asked. I leaned back slightly, creating space, not retreating. That depends, I said, on whether you believe in coincidence. A faint shift in his expression. Not agreement. Recognition of the angle. I do not, he said simply. Of course he did not. Men like him built entire worlds around eliminating chance. Then neither do I replied. Silence settled again, but this time it felt different. Not testing. Aligning. Something unspoken moving into place between us. Adrian studied me for a long moment, his gaze steady, unbroken. You were not supposed to be here, he said. Not an accusation. A conclusion. I did not deny it. Neither were you, I said. His lips curved again, faint, controlled. I always am, he replied. Eventually. I almost smiled. Not because he was wrong. Because he believed it completely. That is what makes you predictable, I said quietly. This time, the reaction was clearer. Not visible to anyone else. But I saw it. A brief pause. A recalibration. You are testing me, he said. Not offended. Observing. I held his gaze. No, I said. I am deciding if you are worth the risk. That changed the air between us. Not dramatically, not loudly, but enough. Enough for him to lean forward slightly, his attention narrowing, focusing. And he asked. One word. No room for evasion. I considered it. Not for effect. For accuracy. You have not decided yet, I said instead. That was the truth. Not about him. About me. His eyes did not leave mine, but something behind them shifted. Not uncertainty. Something closer to interest sharpened into intent. You think I am undecided? He asked. I tilted my head slightly. I think you do not invest attention without purpose, I said. And you have not revealed yours yet. The silence that followed was heavier than before. Not empty. Weighted. Deliberate. Adrian's gaze held mine, steady, unrelenting. Then, slowly, he reached for the card I had placed on the table. He turned it once between his fingers, then set it back down. My purpose, he said quietly, is to understand what you are doing in my city. There it was. Not a question. A statement framed as one. I did not react immediately. That mattered. Your city, I repeated softly. Not mocking. Not challenging. Just acknowledging the claim. His expression did not change. Yes, he said. Mine. I leaned forward slightly, closing the distance by an inch. Not enough to challenge. Enough to engage. Then you already know the answer, I said. His gaze sharpened again, interest deepening. Do I? He asked. I held his eyes, steady, unyielding. If I were a threat, you would not be asking questions, I said. You would be making decisions. That landed. I saw it. The shift in his posture. The way his attention recalibrated, not away, but deeper. And you are not a threat? He asked. I did not look away. That depends on what you value, I said. Silence followed, absolute and complete. Not even the distant noise of the restaurant seemed to reach us anymore. Just stillness. Then Adrian leaned back slowly, his gaze never leaving mine. You are careful, he said, but not cautious. I almost smiled. There is a difference, I said. One protects you. The other limits you. His lips curved again, more defined this time. And which one are you? He asked. I met his gaze fully, without hesitation. The one that does not leave things unfinished, I said. The words settled between us, echoing something he had said before. Deliberate. Intentional. His expression shifted, not dramatically, but enough. Recognition. Confirmation. Good, he said quietly. Because neither do I. And in that moment, something locked into place. Not agreement. Not trust. Something more dangerous. Mutual understanding. Mutual understanding does not create safety. It creates tension. The kind that lingers after words are gone. Settling into something quieter, but far more persistent. I felt it in the way the room seemed to hold its breath, even though no one else knew why. Adrian did not move right away. He stayed exactly where he was, his gaze steady, as if measuring what came next instead of rushing toward it. That alone told me more than anything he had said. Most men in his position would have tried to define the outcome immediately, control the direction, set the terms. He did not. Not yet. You understand what this means, he said finally, his voice low, deliberate. Not a question, a confirmation. I did not look away. It means this does not end here, I replied. His expression did not change, but something behind it sharpened, like a decision being considered rather than made. No, he said quietly. It does not. Silence followed again, but it felt different now. Less like a test. More like a boundary being acknowledged by both sides. I reached for the glass of water on the table, not because I needed it, but because movement matters. Small actions reset the rhythm. I took a slow sip, then set it back down with care. Adrian watched the motion, not the object. That mattered too. You are very controlled, he said. Not admiration. Not criticism. Observation. I almost smiled. So are you, I replied. A faint shift at the corner of his mouth. Agreement, or something close to it. Control is necessary, he said. It prevents mistakes. I tilted my head slightly. It also hides them, I said. That landed differently. Not sharply. Precisely. He did not react immediately. He considered it. That was his pattern. Not denial. Evaluation. And you believe I am hiding something, he said. Not defensive. Curious again. I met his gaze evenly. I believe everyone is, I said. The question is whether it matters. His fingers rested still against the table again. No movement now, no signal. Just attention. And does it? He asked. That was the kind of question that mattered more than it sounded. I let it settle before answering. It depends on whether what you are hiding affects what I am doing here, I said. His eyes narrowed slightly, not in suspicion, but in focus. And what exactly are you doing here? He asked. There it was. The question that had been circling everything else. Not sudden, not unexpected, just finally spoken. I did not rush it. Timing still mattered. Working, I said simply. He did not accept that. Of course he did not. That is what you appear to be doing, he said. I am asking what you are actually doing. The distinction was deliberate. Important. I leaned back slightly, creating space again, letting the moment stretch just enough. Observing, I said. That was the truth. Not all of it. Enough. His gaze sharpened again, interest deepening into something more precise. Observing what? He asked. I held his eyes, steady, unflinching. Patterns, I said. Silence followed. Not heavy. Focused. Adrian studied me for a long moment, longer than before, like he was aligning something in his mind with what he already knew. And what patterns have you noticed? He asked. I exhaled slowly, not out of hesitation, but out of choice. That this place runs on predictability, I said. Schedules, routines, expectations. Everything moves the same way every night. He did not interrupt. That mattered. Except when you are here, I continued. That changed the air again. Subtle, controlled, but real. And what happens when I am here? He asked. I leaned forward slightly, closing the distance again by an inch. Everything adjusts, I said. Not visibly, not immediately, but it does. His expression did not shift, but his attention deepened again, like he was seeing the structure behind the surface now. And you find that interesting, he said. Not a question, a conclusion. I met his gaze fully. I find it useful, I replied. That was the moment something changed again. Not in the room. In him. Not curiosity. Not recognition. Something closer to intent. Useful for what? He asked. One question. Direct. Unavoidable. I did not look away. Not this time. Not anymore. For deciding whether I stay, I said. The words settled between us, clear, deliberate, final in a way that nothing else had been. Adrian did not respond immediately. He leaned back slightly, his gaze steady, his expression unreadable for a moment longer than usual. Then, slowly, he nodded once. Not agreement. Not approval. Acknowledgement. Then you should understand something, he said quietly. Staying here is no longer just your decision. The silence that followed was absolute. Not tense. Not uncertain. Defined. I held his gaze without shifting. Then we will have to see who decides better, I said. And this time, when Adrian Varelli smiled, there was no question left about what came next. His smile did not fade this time. It settled into something quieter, more deliberate, like he had already accepted the direction this was taking. That was the difference now. There was no uncertainty left in the room. Only movement. Slow, controlled, inevitable. I did not look away. That mattered more than anything I could say. You think this is a competition, Adrian said, his voice calm, almost reflective. Not dismissive. Not amused. Something closer to interest. I tilted my head slightly, considering the phrasing. No, I said. I think this is a negotiation. That landed differently. I saw it in the way his gaze sharpened, not in resistance, but in recognition of the shift. Negotiations require terms, he said. And leverage. I let a fraction of a second pass before answering. Then it is a good thing we both have both, I replied. Silence followed, but it was no longer empty. It was structured, defined. A framework taking shape between two people who understood exactly what they were doing. Adrian leaned back slightly, his posture relaxed but intentional. You are very confident for someone in your position, he said. Not a challenge. Not a warning. Observation. I almost smiled. Confidence is not tied to position, I said. It is tied to understanding. His eyes held mine, steady, unblinking. And you believe you understand this situation, he said. I did not hesitate. I understand enough, I replied. That was all I was willing to give. That was all that was necessary. He studied me for a long moment, like he was measuring the edges of something he had not encountered before. Then let us clarify something, he said. You are not here by accident. It was not a question. It was a conclusion he had already reached. I did not deny it. That would have been pointless. No, I said quietly. I am not. The air shifted again, subtle but undeniable. This was no longer speculation. It was confirmation. Adrian's gaze deepened, something more precise settling behind it. And yet you chose this place, he said. This role. I nodded once. For a reason, I replied. He did not ask what reason. Not yet. That was deliberate. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, closing the distance just enough to change the tone of the moment. Then I assume you also understand what happens when you step into something like this, he said. His voice was lower now, not louder. More focused. I held his gaze without flinching. I understand that nothing stays contained, I said. Not once it has been seen. That earned a small shift in his expression. Not surprise. Agreement. Good, he said. Then we are not wasting time. I exhaled quietly, letting the rhythm of the conversation settle into something steadier. No, I said. We are not. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence felt different now. Not testing. Not measuring. Established. Like the rules had been set without needing to be stated. Adrian's fingers moved once against the table, a subtle signal, then stilled again. You said you are observing patterns, he said. Tell me one that matters. That was a different kind of question. Not surface. Not casual. I considered it carefully. Not for long. People here change when you enter a room, I said. His expression did not shift, but his attention sharpened. That is expected, he replied. I shook my head slightly. Not the way you think, I said. That caught his interest fully. Explain, he said. I leaned forward just enough to match his earlier movement. They do not just react to you, I said. They anticipate you. Silence followed, heavier this time. Not uncertain. Precise. Adrian's gaze did not leave mine. And that is different, he said. Not a question. A recognition. I nodded once. Reaction is instinct, I said. Anticipation is conditioning. That landed. I could see it in the way his posture shifted, almost imperceptibly, like a thought had aligned in his mind. And you find that useful, he said. I met his gaze steadily. I find it revealing, I replied. The silence that followed was absolute. Not a sound from the room beyond reached us. Just stillness. Adrian leaned back slowly, his attention never breaking. You see more than you should, he said. Not a warning. A statement. I almost smiled. That depends on who decides what I should see, I said. His lips curved again, faint but real. That is exactly the problem, he said. For the first time, there was something else in his voice. Not just control. Not just interest. Something deeper. Something that suggested this was no longer just about understanding me. It was about deciding what to do with that understanding. Then let me ask you something, I said, shifting the rhythm slightly. He did not interrupt. He waited. That mattered. If you already know I am not here by accident, I continued, why are you still asking questions? That changed the air again. Not dramatically. Not visibly. But enough. Adrian's gaze sharpened, something more deliberate settling behind it. Because, he said slowly, I am deciding whether you are a variable or a constant. The words settled between us, precise and deliberate. I held his gaze, not reacting immediately. That mattered. And which do you prefer? I asked. His expression did not change, but his attention deepened. Constants are predictable, he said. Variables change outcomes. I let a small pause settle before answering. Then you already know the answer, I said. Silence followed, absolute and complete. Adrian did not move. He did not look away. And then, slowly, he nodded once. Not agreement. Not approval. Recognition. Yes, he said quietly. I do. And in that moment, the conversation stopped being about what I was doing here. It became about what he was going to do about it. Recognition does not end a conversation. It changes it. The moment Adrian nodded, something subtle shifted between us, like an agreement had been reached without either of us stating the terms out loud. I did not move. Neither did he. That mattered. Movement, at this point, would have suggested uncertainty. And there was none left here. Then we are past introductions, he said quietly, his voice carrying less edge now, more precision. Not softer, just clearer. I held his gaze, steady and unflinching. We were past that the moment you asked me to sit, I replied. A faint curve touched his lips again, brief but real. Fair, he said. The silence that followed was different. Not tension, not testing, something closer to alignment. The kind that happens when two people stop pretending they do not understand each other. Adrian leaned forward slightly, his attention narrowing, focused entirely on me. Then let us remove the last assumption, he said. You are not here to observe randomly. not a question. A statement he had already decided was true. I did not deny it. That would have been unnecessary. No, I said. His eyes held mine, steady, waiting. Then tell me what you were looking for, he said. The question was direct. No framing. No distraction. Just intent. I let the silence stretch for a moment, not to resist, but to choose how much to reveal. That mattered now more than ever. Consistency, I said finally. His expression did not change, but his attention sharpened again. In what? He asked. I leaned back slightly, creating space, not retreating. In behavior, I said. In structure. In the way systems hold under pressure. That landed differently. Not like the other answers. This one connected to something deeper. Adrian's gaze narrowed just slightly, not in suspicion, but in focus. That is not the language of someone working a floor, he said. I almost smiled. It is the language of someone who pays attention, I replied. Silence followed, heavier this time. Not empty. Intentional. Adrian studied me for a long moment, like he was aligning this new information with everything he had already concluded. And what have you learned so far? He asked. That question mattered. More than the others. Because the answer would define what he did next. I did not rush it. Timing still mattered. That control here is layered, I said. Not obvious. Not direct. It moves through people, not over them. His expression remained still, but something behind it shifted. Recognition. And he pressed. I held his gaze, steady, unyielding. And you are not the top layer, I said. That changed everything. Not loudly. Not visibly to anyone else. But I felt it. The shift in the air. The recalibration. Adrian did not react immediately. He did not interrupt. He did not deny it. He considered it. That was his strength. That is a very specific observation, he said slowly. I nodded once. It is a very specific environment, I replied. Silence followed again, deeper this time. Not tension. Not curiosity. Something closer to assessment. Adrian leaned back slowly, his posture relaxed, but his attention sharper than before. You are either very well informed, he said, or very well trained. I almost smiled. Those are not mutually exclusive, I said. A faint shift at the corner of his mouth. Agreement, or something close to it. And which are you? He asked. I did not answer directly. That would have been too easy. The kind that does not ask questions without already knowing part of the answer, I said. That landed. I saw it. The moment where something aligned in his mind. Not surprise. Confirmation. Then you already know what happens next, he said. His voice was lower now, more controlled, like he was stepping into something more defined. I held his gaze without hesitation. You are going to decide whether I am a problem, I said. His expression did not change. And he asked. I tilted my head slightly, acknowledging the weight of the moment. And whether I am worth solving, I finished. Silence followed. Absolute. No movement. No distraction. Just stillness. Adrian did not look away. He did not shift. He simply watched me, like he was measuring something that could not be calculated easily. Then, slowly, he nodded once. Not agreement. Not approval. Recognition. You are not a problem, he said quietly. That mattered more than anything else he could have said. I did not react. I waited. That mattered too. But you are not simple either, he continued. And things that are not simple tend to change outcomes. I met his gaze fully. That depends on who is calculating the outcome, I said. A faint smile returned, controlled but real. Exactly, he said. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence felt complete. Not empty. Defined. Then Adrian reached for the card again, sliding it back toward me across the table. Keep it, he said. Not a suggestion. A decision. I picked it up slowly, feeling the weight again, different now. Not uncertainty. Something closer to purpose. We are not finished, he added. I slipped the card into my pocket without looking away. No, I said quietly. We are not. And this time, when the silence settled between us, it did not feel like something waiting to be filled. It felt like something already set in motion. Nothing changes all at once. It shifts quietly, piece by piece, until one moment reveals that everything is already different. I felt it as I stood from the table, the card resting in my pocket like a decision I had already made. Adrian did not stop me this time. He did not need to. That was the difference now. I was not leaving. I was moving within something that had already begun. The private room felt smaller as I stepped away, the air less neutral, more defined. I could feel his attention on me even without looking back. Not watching. Tracking. That mattered. I passed through the velvet partition, the noise of the restaurant returning in layers. Conversations resumed. Glasses touched. Routines continued as if nothing had changed. But it had. I could see it now. The patterns were clearer, sharper, like a structure revealed under pressure. People moved differently when they thought no one was observing them. And now I was not just observing. I was part of it. My manager avoided eye contact as I passed him. That told me everything I needed to know. Instructions had already been given. Adjustments made. I was no longer just assigned to a section. I was placed. Deliberately. I moved through the dining floor with measured steps, letting my role settle back into place, but it felt thinner now. Less real. Like something I was wearing instead of something I was. A server passed me near the kitchen, her expression tight with curiosity she did not voice. I did not slow down. I did not offer anything. Information moves faster when it is chased. I had no intention of giving it direction. The kitchen noise grounded me again. Heat. Movement. Orders called and answered. Predictable systems holding under pressure. But even here, something had shifted. The rhythm was intact, but the awareness beneath it had changed. They knew something had happened. They just did not know what. I stepped into the back hallway again. The same narrow corridor, the same controlled silence. But it did not feel neutral anymore. It felt like a transition point. A space between roles. I reached my locker, opening it slowly, not because I needed anything, but because routine still mattered. Inside, everything was exactly where I had left it. No envelope this time. No unexpected variables. That meant something too. He was not repeating the move. He had already escalated it. I closed the locker and turned, pausing for a moment longer than necessary. Not hesitation. Consideration. The line had been crossed. Not by him. By both of us. That mattered. I stepped back toward the main floor, but this time, I did not move toward the tables. I moved toward the bar. A different vantage point. A different pattern. From here, I could see the entire room without being central to it. That was where understanding came from. Adrian had not returned to the private room. He had moved. Of course he had. He stood near the far side now, speaking with someone I had not seen before. Older. Composed. Not staff. Not a customer. Something else. Their conversation was quiet, controlled, but the posture told the truth. This was not casual. This was structure. I watched without staring, letting the reflection in the glass do the work for me. Small details. Timing. Distance. The way people adjusted around them without being told. That was the pattern. That was the system. And Adrian was not at the top of it. I had been right. The realization did not bring satisfaction. It brought clarity. And clarity changes decisions. I shifted slightly, just enough to change the angle, to see more without drawing attention. The older man said something, his tone even, controlled. Adrian listened. Not passively. Not defensively. Engaged. That mattered. Then Adrian's gaze shifted. Not randomly. Directly. To me. Of course it did. He always knew where I was. That was not instinct. That was intention. I did not look away. Not this time. That mattered too. The distance between us was greater now, but the connection felt sharper. Defined. The older man followed his gaze, his attention settling on me for the first time. Not curiosity. Assessment. That was the moment something changed again. Not between Adrian and me. Around us. The system had adjusted. And now, I was no longer just part of the equation. I was visible within it. Adrian turned back to the man, saying something I could not hear, but the tone was clear. Not defensive. Not explanatory. Decisive. The man nodded once, then stepped away, disappearing into the movement of the room like he had never been there. Adrian remained where he was for a moment longer, then moved. Not toward the exit. Not toward the private room. Toward me. I did not move. That mattered. When he stopped across the bar, the distance between us measured, controlled, I understood something I had not fully considered before. This was no longer about whether I stayed. It was about what staying meant. You see it now, he said quietly, his voice carrying just enough to reach me. Not a question. A confirmation. I met his gaze without hesitation. Yes, I said. His expression did not change, but something behind it settled into place. Good, he said. Because from this point forward, there are no assumptions left. The words landed with precision, final in a way nothing else had been. I nodded once, acknowledging what we both understood now. Then we should stop pretending there ever were. I replied. Silence followed, but it was not empty. It was complete. And in that moment, there was no doubt left about what this had become. The moment you stop pretending is the moment everything becomes real. I felt it settle as I stood across from Adrian, the noise of the restaurant fading into something distant and irrelevant. This was no longer a place. It was a position, and I was standing in it without stepping back. Adrian did not move right away. He held the silence, not as a pause, but as confirmation. We had crossed something neither of us would walk back from. Then we should be clear, he said finally, his voice low, precise, carrying only to me. Not a suggestion, a requirement. I met his gaze without hesitation. We already are, I replied. That earned the faintest shift in his expression. Not disagreement, not approval, recognition. He leaned slightly closer to the bar, closing the distance by inches, not enough to challenge, just enough to redefine space. You know this is not just a place, he said. I almost smiled. I know it is a system, I replied. His eyes sharpened, interest deepening. And you stepped into it anyway, he said. I tilted my head slightly. So did you, I answered. A brief pause, then a quiet exhale, almost like acknowledgement. I built part of it, he said, but not all of it. That mattered, not because it confirmed what I had already seen, because he chose to say it. Voluntarily. That was not control. That was positioning. I held his gaze, steady, unflinching. Then you understand why I am here, I said. He studied me for a long moment, longer than before, like he was aligning the last pieces of something that had already taken shape. I understand enough, he said. But not everything. I nodded once. That is the point, I replied. Silence followed, but it was not empty. It was complete. Adrian's fingers rested against the edge of the bar. Still, no signal, no distraction. Just presence. Then let us remove the last layer, he said. You are not just observing. You are evaluating. Not a question. A conclusion. I did not deny it. Yes, I said quietly. His gaze did not waver. For what, he asked. That was the final question. Not because it was the most difficult. Because it required the clearest answer. I let the moment settle, not to delay, but to ensure there was nothing left unspoken behind it. For whether this system holds, I said. His expression did not change, but something behind it shifted. Not surprise. Not resistance. Recognition. And if it does not, he asked. I met his gaze fully, no hesitation left. Then it changes, I said. The silence that followed was absolute. Not a sound from the room beyond reached us. Just stillness. Adrian did not move. He did not look away. He simply watched me, like he was measuring something that had no clear scale. Then, slowly, he nodded once. Not agreement. Not approval. Acceptance. You are not here to take anything, he said. You are here to see if anything can be taken. I did not react. That mattered. That is one way to say it, I replied. His lips curved slightly, controlled but real. And if I told you nothing here is available, he asked. I leaned forward just enough to match his earlier movement. Then I would know you believe that, I said. His gaze sharpened again, something deeper settling behind it. And you do not? He asked. I held his eyes, steady, unyielding. I believe systems reveal themselves over time, I said. Not through claims. That landed. I saw it. The moment where something aligned in his mind, not shifting, not breaking, but adjusting. Then you will need time, he said. Not a question, a statement. I almost smiled. I am already here, I replied. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence felt final, not because it ended something, but because it confirmed everything that had been set in motion. Adrian straightened slightly, his posture returning to something more neutral, more public. But his gaze remained locked on mine. Then we will see, he said quietly. Not a threat, not a promise. Something in between. I nodded once, acknowledging the weight of it. Yes, I said. We will. He stepped back then, not retreating, just shifting position, returning to the rhythm of the room as if nothing had happened. But everything had. I remained where I was for a moment longer, the noise of the restaurant slowly returning, the patterns reforming around me. But now, I was not just watching them. I was part of what would change them. I turned slightly, letting my gaze move across the room, taking in every detail with a clarity that had not been there before. Every movement, every adjustment, every layer. And for the first time since this began, I did not feel like I had stepped into something uncertain. I felt like I had stepped exactly where I was meant to be. Because this was never about being seen. It was about what happened after. And now, there was no question left. He had noticed me, and I had chosen not to disappear.